A pale Montana dawn drifted over the old ranch like a memory that refused to fade, soft and silver and quiet enough to hear your own heartbeat. Fog pooled low over the ground, swallowing fence posts and turning the pasture into a blurred watercolor. The air tasted of cold earth and wet grass, and somewhere in the distance, a lone crow called out as if announcing the arrival of another day Elias Ward wasn't sure he had the strength to face. He walked the fence line with hands stuffed deep into the pockets of his worn canvas jacket. Not out of duty, those days had ended when his wife passed, but because walking was the only thing that kept his grief from sinking its teeth too deep into him. The ranch had become a museum of what used to be, her boots still by the door, her brush still hanging by the barn, her favorite mug resting by the sink as though she might wander in any minute, humming the same soft tune she always hummed at sunrise. He didn't hum anymore. Silence felt safer. But as he passed the back paddock, a sound broke through the fog, sharp, trembling, desperate. A whinny, but not the familiar morning call of greeting he expected. This one cracked at the edges like it was carrying too much weight for its size. Elias slowed, eyes narrowing. Juniper, the chestnut mare with a gentle soul and wiser eyes than most people, was pacing tight circles along the fence. Her tail lashed. Her ears pinned flat. Her sides shook with each frantic breath. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. He moved a few cautious steps closer, boots sinking into the wet earth. He opened his mouth to speak to her, to soothe her in the soft tone his wife used to use, but Juniper did something she had never done in all the years he'd known her. She charged. Not with rage. Elias could read horses better than he could read most humans, but with fear, the kind that strips away instinct and leaves only desperation behind. She stopped just short of the gate, hooves kicking mud, eyes wild as cracked amber. She wasn't warning him away. She was guarding something. Elias lifted his hands slowly, palms forward. "Easy, girl," he whispered, though he knew words meant very little in moments like this. Only then did he notice the shape in the grass behind her. Small. Still. Curled like a question mark waiting for an answer. A newborn. His heart lurched. Juniper had foaled early, too early. The calendar in his mind, the one his wife had always kept so precise, told him the mare wasn't due for weeks. Anxiety crawled through him, cold and familiar. He hadn't handled a foaling alone since. No. He didn't let himself finish that thought. He took one step toward the baby. Juniper screamed, a raw, tearing sound, and slammed her body sideways, blocking his path. He froze, stunned. She had never reacted like this to him. Never shown an ounce of distrust. Her fear wasn't of him, he realized. It was of losing the fragile life trembling behind her. Her breaths puffed clouds into the cold morning as she glared at him, legs trembling, whole body taut as wire. He followed her gaze down to the foal again, and a piece of the fog shifted just enough for him to see the newborn's legs twitch. Not normal twitching. Not healthy, stretching into the world movement. This was stiff, sure, jerky. Something in the foal's limbs wasn't right. Elias swallowed. A familiar ache pressed against his chest, the ache of knowing something was slipping away and not knowing how to catch it. His wife's face flickered in his memory, sunlight on her hair as she knelt beside a struggling foal years ago, murmuring encouragement as though the newborn could understand every word. He felt suddenly, painfully inadequate. She wouldn't have hesitated. She would have calmed Juniper with a single breath. She would have known what to do. He hadn't saved her when it mattered. What made him think he could save this fragile creature now? The fog thickened around him, heavy with doubt. Juniper pawed the ground, drawing his focus back to the present. Her eyes, God, those eyes, were pleading with him and warning him at the same time. She didn't want him near. But she needed help. And she knew it. He could see the war inside her as clearly as he felt his own. "Easy," he whispered again, softer this time. He lowered himself slowly, knees pressing into the wet grass, making himself small. Not a threat. Just a man trying to earn a heartbeat of trust. Juniper hesitated. Her breath hitched. The foal twitched again, this time rolling weakly onto its side, revealing a clearer view of its legs. Elias' stomach dropped. The tendons looked tight. Too tight. Contracted. The kind of condition that could be fixed if someone intervened early enough. Or fatal if they didn't. His pulse hammered. Juniper didn't understand the medical words for what was happening, but she knew one truth. Her baby was fragile. And the world was dangerous. Elias extended one trembling hand toward the ground, not touching Juniper, just letting her see the gesture, the offering of peace. Her ears twitched. She snorted, hooves shifting, indecision rippling through every line of her body. But she didn't charge again. That small moment, barely a fraction of a second, felt like the world tilting back toward possibility. Elias exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He studied the foal again. The tiny creature was fighting with everything it had. Even in weakness, it tried to lift its head, tried to move closer to its mother. But its body betrayed it, trembling with effort it didn't have the strength to give. Elias felt something shift inside him, something he thought grief had smothered. Purpose. Responsibility. A promise he didn't remember making, rising again like embers reigniting. He knew that if he turned away, if he let fear, his or Juniper's, dictate his choice, the foal wouldn't survive the morning. Nature didn't always forgive hesitation. He pressed a hand against the damp earth. The cold seeped into his skin, anchoring him. "I'm not leaving," he murmured, barely audible. Juniper's ears flicked. Her breath slowed. Her stance softened by a fraction. Elias lifted his gaze to meet hers, and in that quiet exchange, a man cracked open by loss, and a mare terrified of losing the last light she had, something shifted. He understood her fear. She understood his intent. And in that fragile, fog-wrapped morning, both made a silent choice. He would fight for the foal. And Juniper would let him try. The sun had climbed only inches above the horizon when Elias returned with blankets draped over his arm and a bucket of warm mash resting against his hip. The fog was thinning, curling away from the paddock like a curtain reluctantly opening. The world looked clearer, but Juniper's trembling hadn't softened. She stood sentinel over her newborn, as if the entire universe were a threat waiting to strike. Elias stopped several feet from the gate, grounding himself before he stepped inside. He could feel his pulse thudding in his neck. His wife's voice echoed faintly in his memory, "With horses you speak first with silence." He let that guide him. Juniper flicked her tail, her eyes trained on him. Her muscles rippled with the tension of a cracked bowstring ready to snap. Yet she didn't charge this time. She simply watched, studied, questioned. He set the bucket down slowly, letting the soft clink of metal settle into the air. Juniper's ears pricked, her attention torn briefly between him and the foal who still lay curled in the cold grass. Elias saw the foal's chest rise and fall in shallow, uneven breaths. Every inhale looked like a battle, every exhale a surrender. The sight squeezed something deep in his chest. "I know," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to Juniper, the foal, or the aching place in his own ribs. "I know." He took one careful step forward. Juniper's head shot up, muscles tensing. Elias froze. He offered the blanket from a distance, arms extended, showing her the softness, the warmth. She snorted, uncertain, but didn't push him back. Another step. Another breath. Another silent question between them. The foal twitched again, and this time the movement was a desperate attempt to stand. Elias watched as the newborn pushed its tiny hooves against the earth, trembling with raw effort. The legs bowed inward, shaking violently. Then, after a heartbreaking moment, the foal collapsed again with a soft, painful thud. Juniper let out a sound that was half cry, half prayer. A mother's helplessness made physical. Elias' throat tightened. He recognized that sound too well. He'd made it himself once, on a night when the world had taken something he loved and given him nothing in return. He stepped forward again. Juniper's head lowered defensively, but she didn't move to block him. Her breaths were sharp, bristling around the edges, but the wildness in her eyes had softened, just enough for him to see the terror beneath it. "You're trying?" Elias murmured, his voice thick with the weight of memory. "Let me try too." He knelt slowly, lowering himself until his knees sank into the mud and his breath fogged the air between them. His palms faced upward, fingers relaxed, a gesture of surrender. Juniper eyed him suspiciously, but the tension in her shoulders eased. Her tail stopped swishing. Her hooves stayed grounded. That was enough. Elias inched forward on his knees until he was close enough to feel Juniper's breath on his skin, warm, sharp, filled with the electric scent of fear and devotion. He bowed his head slightly, a silent nod of respect. She blinked, surprised by the gesture. Then she stepped aside. Just inches. Just enough. Elias felt the shift in his bones. He leaned toward the foal, heart hammering, hands trembling with the ghosts of a past he couldn't quite silence. When his fingers touched the foal for the first time, the newborn flinched, a tiny, fragile tremor under his palm. Elias swallowed hard. The foal was warm but weak, its skin impossibly soft, its breaths unsteady. He could feel the tension in its legs like wires pulled too tight. Contracted tendons. A fixable condition, but only if addressed immediately. Only if someone intervened with patience, warmth, and time. something he had abandoned after his wife's passing. Yet here he was, kneeling in the mud for a creature he'd met only minutes ago. He wrapped the blanket gently around the foal's small body, making sure not to put pressure where there shouldn't be pressure. Juniper whinnied softly, leaning in, her muzzle trembling as she sniffed her baby. Elias nodded to her, whispering, "I've got him. Just for now." Juniper's chest shook. She didn't protest this time. Elias slid his arms beneath the foal, lifting carefully, supporting the fragile head and legs. The foal's body sagged against him, exhausted. Juniper stepped closer, her flank brushing his shoulder. She was giving permission. The moment nearly undid him. He guided the foal to its hooves, holding most of the weight, letting the tiny creature feel the ground again. The legs trembled violently, one buckling then another, but Elias held steady, whispering soft encouragement, his breath catching each time the foal strained harder than it should. "You're trying," he whispered, the words slipping out like a confession. "Good. That's all you need to do." Juniper lowered her head and pressed her muzzle against the foal's back, urging it forward. Elias felt the mare's breath warm his arm, her presence grounding him in a way he hadn't expected. She wasn't fighting him anymore. She was leaning on him. Minute after minute passed. Try. Collapse. Try again. Each attempt lasted a little longer than the one before. Elias' knees were soaked. His hands trembled from holding the foal's weight. But he didn't stop. The world outside the paddock dissolved into blur and silence. All that existed was this trembling life, this grieving mare, this man who had forgotten what it felt like to fight for something that still had a chance. And then, in a moment small enough to be missed by anyone not paying attention, the foal managed to stay upright. Just for a heartbeat. Just long enough to lift its head and wobble toward Juniper. The mare cried softly, a sound like gratitude and heartbreak woven together. Elias steadied the foal, guiding it toward her. Juniper angled her body, positioning herself just right, and for the first time the newborn found her teats. Elias held his breath as the foal latched, just barely, and took its first true drink of life. Juniper shuddered with relief. Elias felt his own eyes burn. He turned his face away, ashamed of the tears, but Juniper nudged him gently, as if saying it was all right to feel again. So he let them fall. The foal drank. Juniper breathed easier. And Elias, for the first time in years, felt something inside him loosen, just enough to let a sliver of hope back in. He stayed there with them until the sun climbed higher, until the fog lifted completely, until the world felt warm again. He didn't realize it yet, but somewhere in that quiet miracle Juniper had already chosen to trust him. And maybe, just maybe, he was learning to trust life again too. By the next afternoon, word had traveled farther than Elias expected. The small Montana town had a way of carrying news the same way wind carried the scent of rain, quietly, quickly, and with its own strange purpose. Children appeared first, pressing their faces against the fence rails, whispering about the miracle foal. Then came their parents, lingering at a distance, pretending they were only there to check on Elias, not the fragile life that had captured everyone's curiosity. Elias didn't mind. Something about the soft murmur of voices felt comforting, like a hearth slowly warming after years of cold. What surprised him most was how Juniper reacted. Instead of retreating, she watched the growing crowd with steady eyes, her body no longer trembling, her stance no longer desperate. She kept close to her foal but didn't push people away. Something in her had shifted after the long night, an unspoken understanding that the world might not hurt her child after all. Among the group was a little boy named Noah, no more than 6, with wide hazelnut eyes and a quietness that ran deeper than childhood shyness. He clung to his mother's sleeve, not speaking a word, something he hadn't done since the winter before, when a car accident had taken his father. His voice had simply folded inward, disappearing into a silence no one knew how to break. But when he saw the foal, he slipped free from his mother's grasp. Elias noticed him first because Juniper did, her ears flicking, her gaze softening in a way that surprised him. The mare stepped forward, lowering her head as Noah approached with tiny tentative steps. "She's okay with him?" Noah's mother whispered, her voice thick with both awe and worry. Elias nodded slowly. "Looks like it." Noah reached the fence and curled his fingers around the top rail. The foal, still weak but standing more often now, lifted its head and blinked as if recognizing a kindred fragility. The boy's shoulders loosened. His lips parted, though no sound came out. Juniper nudged the foal toward him. Elias felt something click, something almost sacred, like watching two fractures in the world meet and try to heal each other. But what happened next made the entire crowd fall still. Noah reached out his hand, trembling, hesitant, afraid of touching something that might break, or might break him further. The foal took one wobbly step and pressed its tiny muzzle into his palm. Noah inhaled sharply. And then, in a whisper so fragile the wind almost stole it away, he spoke. Gentle. His mother gasped, covering her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Elias felt the world narrow to a single point of impossible truth. The boy had spoken. After months of silence, he spoke. The foal nuzzled Noah again as if encouraging him. The boy whispered the word a second time, stronger, trembling with wonder. Gentle. Juniper nudged the boy's shoulder, and something inside Elias cracked open so deeply he had to look away for a moment. He felt his chest shake with a strange mixture of grief and gratitude, like he was watching a life restart in front of him, one soft breath at a time. This wasn't just a foal learning to stand. This was a community remembering how to hope. As the days passed, more people came. Veterans who carried nightmares in their bones. Teenagers who hid bruises no one talked about. Parents who felt the weight of the world pressing too heavily on their knees. They came not because Elias invited them, but because the story of a fragile foal who shouldn't have lived made them believe in something again. Something tender, something possible. Elias didn't fully understand it, but he welcomed them. He found that showing them the foal's progress eased something in him too, like grief was no longer a closed door but a window letting in new air. And every day, Juniper watched him with an expression that held gratitude he never expected to earn. Weeks passed before Elias realized the truth. Juniper wasn't protecting the foal from the world anymore. She was sharing the foal with it. Still, there was one lingering question he couldn't shake. Why had Juniper panicked so violently that first morning? What had terrified her into shutting out even him? The foal was healing, yes, but something about its first hours still felt like a mystery he hadn't fully uncovered. The answer came one crisp evening when Dr. Hargrove, the village veterinarian, arrived to perform a full assessment. Elias held the foal steady while Juniper stood beside them, calm but alert, her breath warm on Elias' shoulder. Hargrove's examination was slow and methodical. Heart, lungs, limbs, tendons, everything was improving. But then the vet pressed his stethoscope to the foal's chest and frowned. His brows tightened. His mouth pinched. A severe quiet settled around them. What is it? Elias asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Hargrove listened again, longer this time. Then he exhaled. She knew, he murmured. The mare knew before any of us. Knew what? Elias whispered. The foal was born with a weak and irregular heartbeat. Very rare. Most don't survive their first night. She wasn't keeping him from you. She was protecting him, in case he didn't make it. The earth seemed to tilt beneath Elias' feet. Juniper had been preparing to lose her baby. Preparing to guard his final moments alone, because she didn't think anyone else would care enough to stand with her. But he had. And the foal had lived. Elias bowed his head, emotion flooding him in a wave so powerful he had to grip the foal's tiny shoulder to keep from collapsing. Tears blurred his vision. Juniper leaned her head against his chest, a soft, solid weight grounding him in the moment. Her breath warmed the fabric of his shirt, and he felt her heart beat steady and strong against his ribs. He understood then. They weren't just healing the foal. They were healing each other. A year passed like a slow, gentle page turning. The ranch changed. Laughter echoed through the once empty fields. Children played near the paddock. Veterans found solace brushing Juniper's coat. Families who barely spoke to each other arrived in silence and left holding hands. Elias named the place Juniper Haven, because she had taught him what it meant to keep someone alive when the world felt too cold. He built a small therapy barn. Trails for quiet walks. A circle of benches where people could simply exist without expectation. And in the center of it all, the foal, now strong, graceful, and curious, became a symbol of second chances. One evening, after everyone had gone home and the sky burned orange with sunset, Elias stood beside Juniper while her grown foal grazed quietly a few yards away. The air smelled of warm hay and soft summer dust. Thank you, Elias whispered, his voice steady for the first time in years. For trusting me back into life. Juniper didn't answer, of course. She didn't need to. She simply leaned her head against him, the way she had on the night everything began, and Elias felt a warm, steady peace settle over him. He closed his eyes, breathing in the moment, letting the world be exactly as it was, whole, fragile, beautiful. Then he turned slightly, whispering into the quiet, "We made it, didn't we?" Juniper's soft nudge against his arm was all the answer he needed. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear a story even more miraculous than this one. You'll cry and then feel whole again. Click it now, we'll be waiting.